Afterwards, stilled, we regret, we forgive. If all were resented, none could live on this earth that is thick with our stumblings. Always, this is the burden of man, that he acts from his heart and his passions. Stung by the goads of the gods, he hews at the ties that are dearest. Lust was the guide they sent us. Wrath was a whip for his coursers. Madness they made the heart's comrade. Repentance they gave for its scourger. This do our hearts demand, that we bear with our friend when he chides us. Insult forgive from the noble embittered soul of Achilles. When with the scorn and the wrath of a lover our depths are tormented, who shall forbid the cry, and who shall measure the anguish? Sharper the pain that loses the taunt than theirs who endure it. Rage has wept in my blood as I lived through the flight o'er the pastures. Shame coils, a snake in my back, when thought whispers of Penthesilea. Bright shine his moans if he mows down this hell-bitch armed by the Furies. But for this shaft of his pity, it came from a lesser Pelides. Not from the slayer of Hector, not from the doom of Sarpedon, Memnon's mighty o'erthrower, the blood-stained, splendid Achilles. These are the Trojan snares and the fateful smile of a woman. This thing the soul of a man shall not bear. That blood of his labour vainly has brought him victory, leaving life to the hated. This is a wound to our race, that a Greek should whisper of mercy. Who can pardon a foe, though a god should descend to persuade him? Justice is first of the gods, but for pity 'twas spawned by a mortal. Pity that only disturbs God's measures, and, false and unrighteous, holds man back from the joy he might win, and troubles his bosom. Troy has a debt to our hearts. She shall pay it all down to the obol. Blood of the fall and anguish of flight when the heroes are slaughtered. Days without joy while we labour and see not the eyes of our parents. Toil of the war cry, nights that drag past upon alien beaches, Helen ravished, Paris triumphant. Endless the items crowd on a wrath in the memory, kept as in bronze, the credit stretches out long and blood-stained and savage. Boast for the terror graved in the hearts of our fathers, that still by our youth is remembered, Hellas waiting and crouching, dreading the spear of the Trojan, flattering, sending gifts, and pale in her mortal anguish, agony long of a race at the mercy of iron invaders. This she shall pay most. The city of pride, the insolent nation, pay with her temples charred and her golden mansions in ruins, pay with the shrieks of her ravished virgins, the groans of the aged burnt in their burning homes for our holiday. Music and dancing shall be in Troy of another sort than she loved in her greatness, merry with conquered gold and insulting the world with her flutings. All that she boasted of, statue and picture, all shall be shattered. Out of our shame she chiselled them. Rich with our blood they were coloured. This not the gods from Olympus crowding, this not Achilles, this not your will, O ye Greeks, shall deny to the Locrian Ajax. Even though Pallas divine with her aegis counselling mercy cumbered my path, I would push her aside to leap on my victims. Learn shall all men on that day how a warrior deals with his foemen. Darting flames from his eyes, the barbarian's sight. And there rose up, frowning, Tydeus' son, the Terenthian, strong Diomedes. Ajax Oileus, thy words are foam on the lips of a madman. Cretan Idomeneus, silence the vaunt that thy strength can fulfill not. Strong art thou, fearless in battle, but not by thy spear point, O hero, Hector fell, nor Sarpedon, nor Troilus, leading the war cry. These were Achilles' deeds, which a god might have done out of heaven. Him we upbraid, who saved? Nor would any now who revile him still have a living tongue for ingratitude, but for the hero. Much do the man forgive who has saved his race and his country. Him shall the termless centuries praise when we are forgotten. Curb then your speech, crush down in your hearts the grief and the choler. Has not Atrides curbed, who is greatest of all in our nations, wrath in the heart and the words that are winged for our bale from our bosoms? For as a load to be borne were these passions given to mortals. Honour Achilles, conquer Troy by his God-given valour. Now of our discords and griefs debate not, for joy of our foemen. First, over Priam's corpse, stand victors in Ilion's ramparts. Discord then let arise, or concord solder our nations. Rugged words, and few, as fit for the soul that he harboured, great Tydides spoke and ceased. And there rose up, impatient, tall from the spears of the north, the hero King Protoino, prince in Cadmean Thebes, who with Laetus led on his thousands. Loudly thou vauntest thy freedom, Ionian Minos, recalling, lord of thy southern isles, who gilt'st with thy tribute to Mycenae. We have not bowed our neck to Pelops' line, or at Argos' iron heel have not crouched, nor clasped, like thy time-wearied nations, Python befriended, gripped in the coils of an iron protection. Bondage soothed by a name, and destruction masked as a helper. We are the young and lofty and free-souled sons of the Northland. Nobly Peleus the Aeacid, seer of a vaster Achaea, pride of his strength and his deeds renouncing for joy of that vision, yielded his hoary right to the sapling stock of Atrides. Noble, we gave to that nobleness freely our grandiose approval. Not as a foe then, O king, who angered sharpens his arrows, fits his wrath and hate to the bow and aims at the heartstrings, but from the truth that is seated within me, compelling my accents, taught by my father's stern, not to lie, nor to hide what I harbour. Truth, the goddess I speak, nor constrain the voice in my bosom. Monarch, I own thee first of the Greeks, save in valour and counsel, brave, but less than Achilles, wise, but not as Odysseus. First, still in greatness and calm and majesty. Yet, Agamemnon, love of thy house and thy tribe disfigures the king in thy nature. Thou, thy brother preferrest, thy friends and thy nations unjustly, even as a common man whose heart is untaught by Athene. Beast-like favours his brood, forgetting the law of the noble. Therefore Ajax grew wroth, and Teucer, sailing, abandoned over the angry seas this fierce-locked toil of the nations. Therefore Achilles has turned in his soul and gazed towards the Orient. Yet are we fixed in our truth, like hills in heaven, Atrides. Greece, and her safety and good, our passions strive to remember. Not of this stamp was thy brother's speech. Such words Lacedaemon hearing may praise in her kings. We speak not in Thebes what is shameful. Shamefuller thoughts have never escaped from lips that were highborn. We will not send forth earth's greatest to die in a friendless battle, nor will forsake the daughter of Zeus and the white glory of Hellas, Helen, the golden-haired Tyndarid, left for the joy of our foemen, chained to Paris' delight, earth's goddess, the slave of the Phrygian. Though Menelaus the Spartan abandoned his wife to the Trojans, and from the field where he lavished the unvalued blood of his people, flee to a hearth dishonoured. Not the Atreid's sullied grandeurs, Greece to defend we have toiled, through the summers and lingering autumns, blind with our blood. For our country we bleed, repelling her foemen. Dear is that loss to our veins, and still that expense we would lavish, claiming its price from the heavens. Though thou sail with thy brother and cohorts, we cling, flee, take thy southern ships, take thy Spartan levies. Still will the Greeks fight on in the Troad, helped by thy absence. For though the beaches vast grow empty, the tents can be numbered, standing friendless and few on the huge and hostile champaign. Always a few will be left, whom the threatenings of fate cannot conquer. Always souls are born, whose courage waits not on fortune. Hellas' hearts will be firm, confronting the threat of the victor. Sthenelus' war and Tydides, Odysseus and Locrian Ajax, Thebes' unconquered sons, and the hero chiefs of the Northland. Stern and persistent as time, or the seas, and as deaf to affliction, we will clash on in the fight, unsatisfied, fain of the war cry, helped by the gods and our cause, through the dawns and the blood-haunted evenings, rising in armour with morn, and outstaying the red of the sunset. Till, in her ashes, Troy forgets that she lusted for empire, or in our own, the honour and valour of Greece are extinguished. So Protoinos spoke, nor pleased with his words Agamemnon. But to the northern kings they were summer rain on the visage. Last, Laertes' son, the Ithacan, war-wise Odysseus, rose up, wide acclaimed. Like an oak was he, stunted in stature, broad-shouldered, firm-necked, lone and sufficient, as on some island regnant, one peak whose genial streams flow down to the valley. Dusk on its slopes are the olives, the storms butt in vain at its shoulders. Such he stood, and pressed the earth with his feet, like one vanquished, striving but held to his will. So Atlas might seem, were he mortal, Atlas, whose vastness free from impatience suffers the heavens. Suffering spares the earth, the thought-haunted motionless Titan, bearer of worlds. In those jarring tribes, no man was his hater, for as the master of all guides humanity, so this Odysseus dealt with men and helped and guided them, careful and selfless, crafty, tender and wise, like the master who bends o'er his creatures, suffers their sins and their errors, and guides them, screening the guidance. Each through his nature he leads, and the world by the lure of his wisdom. Princes of Argolis, chiefs of the Locrians, spears of the Northland, warriors vowed to a sacred hate and a vengeance that's holy. Sateless still is that hate, that vengeance cries for its victims. Still is the altar unladen, the priest yet waits with the death knife. Who, while the rites are unfinished, the god unsatisfied, impious turns in his heart to the feuds of his house and his strife with his equals? None will approve the evil that fell from the younger Atrides. But it was anger and sorrow that spoke, it was not Menelaus. Who would return from Troy and arrive with his war-wasted legions back to his home in populous city or orcharded island, there from his ships disembarked, look round upon eyes that grow joyless, seeking a father or husband slain, a brother heart treasured, mothers in tears for their children? And when he is asked, O our chieftain, what dost thou bring back in place of our dead, to fill hearts that are empty? Who then will say, I bring back my shame, and the shame of my nation? Troy yet stands, confronting her skies, and Helen in Troia. Not for such foil will I go back to Ithaca or to Laertes. Rather far would I sail in my ships past southern Cythera, turning away in silence from waters where on some headland, gazing south o'er the waves, my father waits for my coming. Leaving Sicily's shores, and on through the pillars of Gades, far I would sail, whence sound of me never should come to Achaea, out into tossing whirls and weltering reaches of tempest, dwarfing the swell of the wide-wayed Aegean. Oceans, unbounded either by cliff or by sandy margin, only the heavens ever receding before my keel, as it ploughs on forever, frail and alone in a world of waves. Even there would I venture seeking some island unknown, not return with shame to my fathers. Well might they wonder how souls like theirs begot us for their offspring, fighters, war-afflicted, champions banded by heaven, wounds and defeat you have borne. Bear too their errors who lead you. Mortals are kings and have hearts. Our leaders too have their passions. Then, if they err, yet still obey, lest anarchy, fostered, discord and deaf rebellion that speed like a poison through kingdoms, break all this army in pieces, while 80, mocking at mortals, trails to a shameful end this lofty essay of the nations. Who among men has not thoughts that he holds for the wisest, though foolish? Who, though feeble and naught, esteems not his strength or his fellows? Therefore the wisest and strongest choose out a king and a leader, not as a perfect arbiter, armed with impossible virtues, far o'er our heads and our ken, like a god high judging his creatures, but as a man among men, who is valiant, wise, and far-seeing, one of ourselves, and the knot of our wills, and the sword of our action. Him they advise and obey, and cover his errors with silence. Not Agamemnon the Atreid Greeks we obey in this mortal. Greece we obey, for she walks in his gait and commands by his gestures. Evil he works then, who loosens this living knot of Achaea, falling apart from his nation, who, wed to a solitary virtue, deeming he does but right, renounces the yoke of his fellows. Errs more than hearts of the mire, that in blindness and weakness go stumbling. Man, when he spurns his kind, when he equals himself with the deathless, even in his virtues, sins, and erring calls up 80. For among men we were born, not as wild beasts, soul in a fastness. Oft with a name are misled the passionate hearts of the noble. Chasing highly some image of good, they trample its substance. Evil is worked, not justice. When into the mould of our thinkings God we would force, and enchain to the throb of our hearts the immortals. Justice and virtue her sister. For where is justice mid creatures perfectly? Even the gods are betrayed by our clay to a semblance. Evil, not good, he sows, who lifted too high for his fellows, dreams by his light or his force to compel this deity earth-born. Evil, though his wisdom exceeded the gathered light of the millions. Evil, though his single fate were vaster than Troy and Achaia. Less is our gain from gods upon earth than from men in our image. Just is the slow and common march, not a lonely swiftness far from our human reach that is vowed to impossible strivings. Better the stumbling leader of men than inimitable paces. If he be Peleus' son, and his name the Phthian Achilles, worse is the bane. Lo, the Ilion battlefield, red with his errors. Yet, O ye Greeks, if the heart returns that was loved, though it wandered, though with some pride it return, and reproaching the friends that it fled from, be not less fond than heart-satisfied parents, who yearn o'er that coming, smile at its pride, and accept the wanderer. Happier music never has beat on my grief-vexed ears than the steps of Achilles turning back to this Greece, and the cry of his strength in its rising. Zeus is awake in this man, who his dreadful world-slaying puissance gave in an hour of portentous birth to the single Achilles. Taken today are Ilion's towers. A dead man is Priam. Cross not the hero's will in his hour, Agamemnon Atrides. Cross not the man whom the gods have chosen to work out their purpose then when he rises. His hour is his, though thine be all morrows. First in the chambers of Paris' delight, let us stable our horses. Afterwards, bail that is best shall be done persuading Achilles. Doubt not the gods' decisions. Awful, immutable, ruthless. Flames shall lick Troy's towers, and the limbs of her old men and infants. Oh, not today nor now remember the faults of the hero. Follow him rather bravely and blindly, as children their leader. Guide your fate through the war surge loud in the wake of his exploits. Rise, O ye kings of the Greeks, leave debate for the voices of battle. Peal forth the war shout, pour forth the spear sleet, surge towards Troia. Ilion falls today. We shall turn in our ships to our children. So Odysseus spoke, and the Achaeans heard him applauding. Ever the pack by the voice of the mighty is seized and attracted. Then from his seat Agamemnon, arising his staff to the herald gave, and around him arose the kings of the west and its leaders. Loud their assembly broke with a stern and martial rumour.